Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Universal Talk. On today's show, we ponder the relationship that exists between our thoughts and what occurs in our lives. Let's present the case. First, we must consider that what we think may just become reality. What if thought did become reality? What if, by simply focusing a thought on a certain intent, that an individual could manifest what they are wanting or needing? In a moment, we'll have Phyllis Schlemmer on the show. Phyllis is an internationally known psychic, medium, astrologer, and healer. She's the author of The Only Planet of Choice, based on communications transceived from a group of beings known as the Nine, culminated from over 20 years of research with her colleagues. Aside from her continued work with the Nine, she has worked with various corporations and civic leaders and assisted law enforcement agencies in locating missing persons. Hello, Phyllis Schlemmer. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello. Good morning, everyone.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I'm 81 years old. I've been working in this field since I've been approximately 5 years old. Both my grandmothers, were mediums and psychics, so they were kind of my teachers or disciplinarians, whatever you want to call it. I don't know where I can go with this because I've done so many things in my lifetime with it. And I've worked with Dr. Andrea Puharich for about 25 years. The Nine entered our life, or my life, in the late 60s. Puharich recognized who they were, and I do deep trance. I go into an unconscious state, have no memory, and these beings speak through me. Or one of them does. One of them calls himself the spokesperson, and he says his name is Tom. I lived in Israel for many years. I grew organic fruit over there. And I never did know Hebrew, but when I moved to Israel, what I found out is that word, which it's not exactly Tom as we know it, but the way it's like Tom, is the Hebrew word for innocence. So maybe that's who they are. I mean, they come across like that. I had a school in Orlando where I was developing about 18 people for mediumship, and I used to teach in trance. And then one time, a being came in who was completely different than the teacher that was what I considered a spirit teacher teaching them, who was very gentle, soft-spoken, and my class told me about him. I recorded everything when, in those days, going back in that time, we had these big reel-to-reel recorders, and one of my students would turn it on when I went into trance, and the teacher would teach them. Well, this being came in, and my class talked to me afterwards. We used to, I didn't permit them to eat before the class, like from 2 o'clock. We met at class about 8. And then afterwards, we would eat and share. They would share with me what had happened, and they told me about this being who spoke beautifully, gently, and spoke of universal things, not of personal things. This went on for a couple of weeks, and finally I said to them, do you ask who he is? And they said, no. I said, you have to challenge. You always must challenge. So one of them did challenge and said, well, who are you? What's your name? And he said he was a spokesman and so forth. And then they said, well, we can't record you. And he said, well, isn't it the correct thing to ask permission before you do that? And they finally got it, and they did ask permission. And from then on, he's been recorded. So that's a bit of the background. I've done a lot of work in my field with this ability, and I've been grateful for it. I have 2 absolutely wonderful daughters. I have a fantastic granddaughter and 2 wonderful great-grandchildren, a little boy, Matthew, and a girl named Molly. My daughters have the ability, but they don't use it. My oldest daughter is a bit afraid of it. She's a fantastic astrologer, but she's very, very nervous about this, and she doesn't even sit with me when I'm working because it makes her nervous. My youngest daughter is very good. She's a very good healer, but again, she doesn't use it. They're all a bit, the responsibility of it, I think, frightens them a little bit because it is a large responsibility. But my youngest daughter is now being trained to work with the 9. So that's where I am right now.
Can you discuss a little bit about the 9? Was that who came through in your class at that time or not?
Yeah, the 9, he said his name was Tom. My grandfather's name was Tom, so I assumed it was my grandfather. It was only Dr. Puharich, who discovered that it was the 9. Going back into the 50s, Puharich had visited with an Indian seer who had come to see him, and this man had gone into trance, and a voice spoke through him. This is spontaneous. And a voice spoke through him and told him that they were a group of beings, universal beings, and they were 9 principles of the universe. So Puharich listened, and several times when this doctor, his name was Dr. Vinod, when he visited, he would spontaneously go into trance, and Puharich, always with a recording available or someone there to take down notes, listened. And then this gentleman went back to India. He passed on, and from then on, Puharich never again had a contact. So he had been looking for years, again, to see if there could be a contact again. Well, the being that spoke to him through Dr. Vinod had given him several clues on how he would know if they returned into whomever they were speaking through. And he did all the research on Eileen Garrett. He did the research on Peter Herkos. He brought Uri Geller to the States. He was always investigating. And I had in my class a student that I felt was a very good healer, and I had asked Puharich to come visit me in Florida so he could meet with this young man and see how we could develop him. And so Puharich finally asked my source. He said, Phyllis, I would like you to bring your source in if you can. I want to speak to them because then I can get some more information. So I then went into a altered state and went unconscious, and that's when Puharich realized. He asked certain questions. They told him where they came from. They gave him the coordinates. Where the first landing was, gave him the coordinates, so et cetera. He checked it out. It was someplace that I wouldn't even have the faintest idea about, and the coordinates were correct and the name was correct. So he realized that he had the beginning of communicating again with the 9. So for years now, I worked in a Faraday cage, and for those who don't know what a Faraday cage is, well, actually, it's named after, I think it was a Scottish scientist or English scientist that designed it. It's a copper cage, so there's no interference. There's no electromagnetic fields or any of that thing. And so when you're working there, what's coming through is pure. It feels completely different to me when I'm in a cage working than if I'm unconscious outside the cage. In my energy field, that's how I equate it. So through the many years of working in the cage with Puharich, he got a lot of information from them. They're very loving. They say that they are from deep space. They're from the cold zone in deep space. Gene Roddenberry lived with us for a while. And I think out of that, if anyone remembers, the Deep Space Nine series came out of that, the beginning of it. John Denver sat with me. Lots of heads of, not a lot of heads of states, but some heads of states, a lot of scientists, all kinds of people asking questions. We had, when we decided, when the book was decided to be written, The Only Planet of Choice, I had over 40,000 pages of transcripts.
Wow.
That was like, And so we had a wonderful person who came to, at that time I was living in Israel, raising organic fruit. And there's a reason I went to Israel, which is another story. I have lots of stories.
I'll bet you do.
Yeah, and a young woman came to stay with us, and a young man, his name was Valachek, and he was the youngest who had ever received a PhD from Max Planck Institute. And he was taking a year off, and his friend, her name she's been married several times, or one time or something after this, but her name was Lark. She was the daughter of Yul Brynner. Wonderful person, totally dedicated. She sat on my computer for a whole year transcribing the tapes, which had never been transcribed, and this was in the 80s. And she was given a list of what we should publish from the scientists and from Andrea and Sir John Whitmore, who joined our group. And from that, she would listen to the entire tape, and then she would go back and mark the subjects that she needed to print out, or what we needed to put into the book. And that's how it was done. And it took a long time. This was in the 80s. We didn't get it published until, I think, the first publishing was in 93, 94, somewhere there. It was a monumental work, and it was a work of love. The people who were involved with it just gave of their time, donated energies. Some people donated some money, because I didn't have any money, and Puhari certainly didn't have after he was doing all the research with Geller and so forth, and helped us out with it. So it's been going ever since. That's about the book. We still.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I said that's pretty amazing. So let me go back a little bit here to the original question. I mean, do you think that thought can become reality, or what we focus on can manifest?
Absolutely. The Nine says this all the time. He said part of the problem that we have in this world, because planet is the only planet of choice, I'd like to explain that first, what that means.
Okay. They
explain that Earth is the only planet of total free will. And it was they say they come from, that there's 24 civilizations that work under them. And this planet was designed to be an incredible planet of variety. They say other planets don't have this variety. We have the mountains and the deserts, and we have, look, if you have to look at planet Earth, you can see the beauty here. It's just incredible. And so on this planet, we have free will. And this was an experiment. They had decided that souls in an evolving state, every one of them at one time or another had to come to the planet of free will to experience free will. And I think through that, they also experienced free will. They were never in a physical world. So what happens here is you come here, you love it so much, you recycle here. I mean, it's constant or being reborn here. He said, and also there are other planets in the universe where, it's now being recognized that there could be living beings on other planets. I mean, what a breakthrough this is. When we started with this project, they all thought we were crazy. This is a planet that other entities also come into. And they are wanting to control and manipulate this planet because through it, they can really rule everything. And what the Nine are talking about is we must be extremely careful with our thoughts because we create our reality with it. And fear can create an awful lot of reality. I teach a course called Script Writers Wanted, No Experience Necessary, and it was based on the Nine's work. What I do is, through this course, explain to people how they can control their thoughts, how they can utilize what they're thinking with their love and their desire, as long as it's not hurting anyone, because once you start to use it for manipulation and control, it hits you back. There's this kind of unwritten law that is really there, and people think, well, we're a bit crazy to say that, but it is actually true, and there's many experiences that I've had and experiments that have been done with it. So they constantly are talking about how thoughts create everything, how you put into motion what it is that you want. Now, it may not happen immediately, but eventually down the line, it will come to fruition for you. And you can also stop what it is that you want by your own negative thinking, and also by your personality or your fear that you're not worthy of it, or if you had parents that told you didn't know what you were talking about, which happens a lot, that can stop it. So you have to overcome that portion of your personality, and you can bring in what you want. I think if you talk to all the people who have really made it in the world, that are doing what it is that they want to do, even those who just wanted the money to do things, they will tell you that deep inside they knew they were going to accomplish that, and they were focused on that, maybe not 24 hours, but it came into their mind, they visualized it, they thought, and it came to fruition for them. So, yes, we must be careful. If we live in fear, there's another thing, Joe. When I used to teach many years ago, I was attempting to get this across to people, how their fear manifests in their life. Now, in the U.S., at least in some of the smaller towns, there's about 22 houses on a street. If somebody's going in there to rob in that area, they will be attracted to the energy of fear. That is the house that will get robbed.
Oh, I see.
It's amazing how this works. I had a very good... Hello?
Yeah, I believe exactly what you're saying. In fact, if you know anything about the law of attraction, I mean, that just speaks wonders.
And the average public doesn't understand this. I mean,
right.
I had a very good friend who was also one of my students, and she was absolutely incredible. And suddenly, you know, she'd always been very open and so forth, but suddenly her husband decided he wanted to put an alarm system in the house. And that was the house that was robbed, even with the alarm system. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't put an alarm system in, but it was that fear of his that brought them to that house.
Right.
So, first of all, we have to, you know, who was it? Roosevelt said we have only to fear the fear itself. That's one of the major things the Nine talks about. Do not permit the fear to manifest and overwhelm you. Nothing can harm you. You are a cell of the universe. You are an individual that contains everything that the universe holds. And if you can accept that and begin to understand that, you can overcome a lot. Now we are in a upheaval on the planet, tremendous upheaval. We have seen what greed has done. We have seen what the wars are in third world countries, the starvation, all of this. They claim that this is like the shakeup, the arena of chaos, that out of it will emerge balance and order and everyone having an opportunity. I don't have the right languaging to explain this to the public. I can only say how I feel and what happens when things do go wrong. and you can see it happening all the time. And they also claim that when 78% of the people began to understand that there are other universes, other beings, and accept that we are not the only ones and that we are also not alone, then there will be this tremendous shift that happens.
Right.
And suddenly, there it is. Our thoughts then will be manifesting in a very good way. They also claim that a lot of people who are reincarnated here, who have come here to help, and we see that with the children today. Puharich was doing incredible research with young children and young people. But for every 100 that come here, they find it so difficult here because of the freedom and the temptations that only 2 of them make it. So that is also changing. I see that now changing. There are more and more wonderful young people being born into this society. Hopefully, parents will guide them correctly. It's amazing. I mean, I meet people, little ones, young people also from around the world for many, many years that will walk up to me and recognize me. When they're it's amazing. I had a little girl one time. She was living in India, and she, beautiful little girl, she came up to me and she whispered, and now her parents never knew this, and she said, whispered in my ear, "I come from the red planet. I
Oh my God.
Be in touch with you." This was 40 years ago.
Wow.
When no one knew of anything like this.
Yeah, right.
It was amazing. So,
Hey, Phyllis, do you want to give the listeners a website that you may have, or talk about your book for a little bit here? And
sure. The website is The Only Planet of Choice, www.theonlyplanetofchoice.com.
Okay. That way, if they need any more information, then they can log on to your website.
Right, they can log on and find it there. They can also get in touch with me. My email is on there for people who want to get in touch with me about the book and things like that. So
that's great. So why do you think the public why don't we know all this, about energy and fear, and how fear and doubt will prevent the energy from being created?
I think the scientists that had these ideas and these thoughts and kind of attempted to do this research were just by the rest of them. Look, at science still denies so many things.
Right.
It controls us in a way, and people give their power away to those educated, so-called educated people who know better than what we think we know. I've had a lot of, I've been tested a lot. And fortunately, I was lucky enough that Puharich found me. But I've had some. I'll give you an example. I was sitting once in a group with my class, and I had this scientist from Tallahassee, University of Florida, ask if he could sit in the group. He wanted to research what was going on in my class. Now, going back then, I used to have a room that had no windows in it at all. I had a microphone in the ceiling. I had a young man sitting on the right of me and a young man sitting on the left of me, and I had alternates with male, female. And he had the one on the right had a remote control. So I would talk, and my students would talk, but the minute I went into trance, he would turn on the remote control, and everything would be recorded by what I called at that time the spirit's teacher teaching them. And that's why I could say that we never was able to record Tom, because we would hear the teacher teaching, and then when Tom came in, you couldn't hear him. So until later when they asked why. Well, this scientist sat on my left-hand side, and I worked in a room where I just had a blue light in there, so a very dull blue light, so at least the students could see me. and so forth. So I didn't want them to be in total darkness. And it was comfortable for them. It was comfortable for me. Well, I went into trance, and evidently there was some kind of energy that could be seen. I think it was ectoplasm. At that point, this scientist grabbed me, and I went into a state of shock. I mean, I came out of that in agonizing pain, hardly able to move. He violated me, and he was told not to touch me. But he was one of these scientists who he was going to prove I was a fake. That's what my feeling was about it.
Right.
I could hardly work for a year afterwards. It took me such a long time to have the courage to go back into that space again. So there are people out there that are like that, and then there are really good science and scientists that are trying to find out what this is all about and to understand it. And what I'm so pleased about is that now it's becoming more and more knowledge of what we are doing, not Tom and myself, but what we do as a human race, create devastation to ourselves. They are measuring. Years ago, I mean, so many people dissed what was happening, but years ago, Sir John Whitmore, one of my colleagues, financed a research and a congress in London. And he had a lot of scientists there. There were wonderful scientists in Europe that were doing a lot of research on this. And there was one of them who actually showed X-ray pictures of a person who claimed that voodoo was being practiced on him. And when they took X-rays of his arms, there were needles inside the arms.
Wow.
That was, nobody still talks about that till today.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. Huh.
It was absolutely incredible how that kind of thing was being done to this individual. And this scientist studied this man for a long, long time. So he started that research back in the 60s.
Right.
And it wasn't accepted in the world. Everyone, these were really incredible scientists with open minds, and yet they were dissed by the rest of the scientific community. And look at what was done with Cleve Baxter and Dr. Lohr when they did all the research in the 60s and 70s, early 80s, on how you affected plants. I mean, they could prove that. I think Cleve Baxter did one of the most incredible scientific researches on plants identifying a robber in a bank. That no one's known about that.
No, that's pretty amazing.
So what they did was he had some plants in a bank. He was doing some experiments with plants. It was his idea. The plants were in the bank. I don't know if he put them in, but the bank was robbed. And they couldn't really identify the robber. And his idea was, okay, let's see, we'll take the plants out. We do a lineup. We put electrodes on the plant, because the plant will tell you. And the plant identified who was in the bank doing the robberies. Now, that's never been known much. Only people in my field had heard about it or had read a paper on it.
Right.
These things could be used today in with police work and so forth.
Right.
And one of the other things I've done is I have worked with the police, and I have worked. I worked with the Israeli government looking for people. I've worked here with the police looking for some missing people.
How do they take you? Like, do they believe in it, or like were they skeptical at first?
Well, the attitude is, we can't do anything. We've done everything that we can. We've got nothing to lose. So they're more open, actually, in Israel to it. than they are anywhere else. I mean, we do have, of course, the scientists and so forth that don't accept this. But, you know, there was a lot of UFOs seen in Israel, too, and nobody was ever talking about it. And one time I was living in Haifa at the time on Mount Carmel, and I lived in like 187 steps up in the air, overlooking the Haifa, the bay in Haifa, and a group of lights were seen, and they were so bright that you could actually see the water. And I had a group of Israelis visiting me at the time, and they were all out on the porch I had upstairs, overlooking the bay and so forth, and these lights were moving in such a way. Well, you know, in Israel, they do use a lot of flares and so forth to look for problems. But they weren't acting like flares, you know, because the flare doesn't go suddenly fast up and then move to the right and to the left and all of that. And there actually were, I think it was 9 of these lights. And sometimes they would just suddenly disappear, and then they would come back. And everybody was up there fascinated with them, watching them. And one of the girls said, "I'm calling the government." And so she got on the phone, and she called the Air Force, I guess it was. And she asked about it. She said, "Do you know about these lights out here? Are they flares?" And he said, no, yeah, we know about them. And no, they're not flares. But we know they're there, and we're watching it. She said, "Well, what about this? What do we do? What are they doing?" And all they said to her was, "Don't worry, they will not harm you." And with that, a few minutes later, all these lights, which were so bright, they came down and you could see the water, I mean, clearly, went zoom and out of sight. So, you know, we know that the Israelis did not have a vehicle at that time that could do that. And there's been sightings there a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you know, speaking of the sky, last night I was doing some stargazing because I think the other day we had a full moon here. But
right.
in any rate, there was no clouds in the sky. It was crystal clear out, and I'm watching the planes come over every once in a while because I pretty much live in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden, you know, we're looking up there, and I mean, it's just like a dot, like the stars that you could hardly see. It starts moving across the sky. And by virtue of the height and how fast this thing was moving compared to all the planes that were quite easily visible, I don't know what this was, but it was. I can't imagine it being something like an airplane that was that high. Along with that, also in the sky, I really believe this new. To me, it's new, and I look at the stars quite a bit. But around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, for the past month or so, I've been seeing this thing in the sky that's really large and reddish. And you know, last week we had Ann Eller on, speaking of Nibiru, or Planet X, or whatever else they call it, and I've really got to wonder if that's what this is, a planet, because if you look at the rest of the sky, I mean, there's nothing even around it as far as it's almost at the horizon, and all the other stars are way up in the...
Right.
And
well, it could just be coming closer to us.
Right. And it's quite obvious to me, and, you know, I've always looked at the stars in the sky, and I've never seen this before. And just within the past couple months, I noticed it quite obviously, and you got to scratch your head and say,
right.
Curious.
Yeah. And, of course, you know, with the 2012 sphere that's out there,
right.
I added another chapter to my book about 2012 that, you know, it's really misunderstood. It hopefully will be a opportunity for mankind to realize who they are, what they are, where they come from, how they're a part of everything. And instead of this devastation and destruction that everyone talks about, it's not that.
Absolutely. But however, like you said, if thought becomes reality, and the more
Right.
people on the planet are in the doom and gloom scenario rather than the positive, unconditional love,
Right.
and there is that tipping point, like you said.
That's why we're so hard trying to tell people, get out of that mode of thinking.
Right.
And we need to change this.
Well, the way I describe it is, even if you look at it from a religious point of view, people that go to a church, it's not the actual building, it's the people with the intent. And if you get, say, 20 people praying on the same thing, their intent and their thought becomes reality, and that's how miracles happen. So if we as a planet and a species would come together for a similar or a common goal, such as peace on Earth, and there's been research in this,
Oh, there is. I'll give you one thing that happened. I don't know, you're too young to remember the space lab coming down, I think. I think when was that, in the 70s or 80s? You were, I was at the time living in Israel, and the space lab was up and it was starting to come down, and so my group asked the 9 what to do. And the 9 said, the only thing that will control it and guide it will be a group of people meditating. Well, at that time, Uri Geller had announced on the radio and on television, I think he was on TV, saying that at noon on that one particular day, that he would ask people that come out of their jobs that are on their lunch hour to go into parks or to sit quiet and meditate with him. 20 million people did this. And they were trying to throw the lab back up so it wouldn't land on anyone on planet Earth. Well, it didn't work. And but at the same time, my group in Israel asked if we could do anything to stop that, and they said yes. We needed to get 12 Jewish people. And the question was, why Jews?
Right.
The answer was because you get 3 Jewish people together and you have 5 opinions. And that's true.
Yeah.
Because, they will have arguments with each other over everything. And very incredible minds. So my daughter happened to be in Israel with me at the time. She was visiting me. And we interviewed, my husband and I interviewed a lot of people. And they said, we don't want these people to ever go out and talk about it. We don't want them to, they have to do this unconditionally, never to let the public know what they've done about it, not to brag about it until we say it can be done. So we interviewed and interviewed and interviewed, and we found 12 people. We were told how to meditate, what to do, and we did it. They told us where it was coming down, when it would come down, that absolutely no one would be hurt, and that it was exercise in learning and to teach people that with 9 to 12 people, all things are possible.
Right.
So we did this. The space lab came down exactly where they said. No one was hurt. It was off the coast of Australia somewhere. I don't remember the coordinates right now.
Mm-hmm.
And none of those people ever went out and spoke that they were a party to this, that they had ever done this. And only about 10 years ago, and that was going back in the 70s, 80s, I don't remember the date, that only approximately 10 years ago, when I was doing the lecture, I had gone over to Israel, had done the lecture, and someone in the audience who had been one of the members asked, was it any way we could know about that? And the 9 said we could now talk about it. So we have groups all over the world meditating to create a situation of peace and calmness. And of course, with it, you see the opposite happening a lot of times, because it's like the last throes of a monster dying. when they're fighting for everything.
Right.
So that's why we've got a lot of other things going on. But
right.
we've asked the 9, my group has asked the 9, and they said we can do this at any time. We have done this in the past with 12 people when there's been something that I was at a Crohn's council in, I think it was last September in Atlanta, and there was a lady there who her daughter needed a transplant, and she was really in a bad state. And so we all prayed and meditated, and within the time we were praying and meditating, a phone call came in that they had found a transplant, and she was like the last one on the list. And so she'd been waiting a long time. So the power of people coming together, focusing with one thought, not involving their own personalities, letting go of their egos, and just knowing that happened because they were a part of it and it was not necessary for anyone else to know. That's how it works. So,
I want to open up the lines, Phyllis, if anybody has any questions for you. The call-in number is 1-718-664-9323. And if you have any questions for Phyllis, or if you have any thoughts you would like addressed, give us a call. That number again is 1-718-664-9323. Also, I wanted to add that I know there's a conference coming up in the next week or so, and Stephen Bassett, he was going to call in if he had a chance. If not, I just wanted to give a shout-out to him, and hopefully the listeners that are listening will consider going to his website. And he's actually on my website, Universal Talk, if you want to check him out. And maybe if you're interested to check out this X conference that he has going on within the next week. But anyway, Phyllis, would you say that you're a deep channel then?
Yes. I know I don't like the word channel. I have to say that.
Well, because human beings have to
people call me a channel. It's easier for them. I call myself a transceiver.
Right. Well, I think some of us are conduits, and depending on what word you want to use, some of them have a negative connotation in certain people's minds, and there is some confusion. But the way we have to speak here on this earth at this time is through language, and
that is understood. The language is acceptable.
Right, and there is a barrier in that, because some of the things that come across from above, if you will, or higher vibrational energies coming through, they have a limitation of what they can express because of the limitation within our language.
That's for sure. Tom says that all the time. And I can't hear the tapes. In the early days, Puharich and Whitmore used to make me listen to the tapes, and I had such a hard time because the minute I would hear that voice, and it was my voice being used, but not my voice. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
yes, I know.
I would just start going back into a trance state. So in the early days, they kind of forced me to listen to it. And I had been trained by my grandmothers never to read anything about other people, never to go to any other people's workshops or anything of that nature. Not the only reason for it was that they had this old-fashioned idea. They did not want me to be contaminated with having any other information inside my brain. And so I guess that kind of stayed with me, and the fact that I even had to listen to these tapes, which were in a way mine, but now I can read it. So I go through the transcripts and read. We're still working.
One thing that I think they may have had, maybe because of a little bit of fear, but also what you just said, but one thing that I found is that different people, and we're talking about energy here, different people carry vibrational frequencies and energies, and when you get into that particular person's frequency and energy, you take on a lot of their gifts. So the more people that you meet, and the more... Go ahead.
People need to understand that. The people in the world need to understand that if they don't know how to protect themselves or maintain their own balance, they can be taken over by someone else's energy fields without even knowing that that's what's happening with them. You see it with
some of the people don't even know they're doing it.
No, they don't. We have a lot of vampires out there.
Yep, vampires, yep.
When I say that, I mean, they can take your energy without you knowing it. And without them knowing you're doing it, they feel really wonderful being with you.
Oh, yeah. As you're getting drained and they're getting brighter.
Exactly. That's the one thing I wish that it could be proven scientifically, and I think there are scientists that are working on that. It's very interesting.
I think a lot of the things that you're talking about have been proven in the past, but the information hasn't been let loose because whether it be fear.
And this is true, and now it is being let loose. Look what the Catholic Church did and said that now it is possible. There's other civilizations, and for years, I mean, I was considered working for the devil by the Catholic Church.
Oh, I know. My mother came in last week and was telling me I'm something like that because she don't understand.
I was in a Catholic school, and because my parents didn't know quite what they sent us. My father was Irish Roman Catholic. My mother was an Italian Jewish. So I was sent off to a Catholic school, and the nuns were sure that I had the devil in me. And the priest used to use me to take me out to do exorcisms because I could see, the spirit or the devil or the demon or whatever it was that they thought was inside.
Now, how ironic is that?
Yeah.
The priest was using you to help them, but yet you're a devil worshiper.
Right, by the nuns.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my goodness. What people don't understand and mainly what they fear. And you know what? This is funny. I was mowing the grass yesterday, and I just thought about how Jesus Christ's life was on this planet, having this higher knowing at a time that nobody else understood it, and they feared it. And therefore, the people today are the same way the people were back then towards enlightened minds, and they don't even realize it. But yet, if you tell them the story of Jesus Christ, they're like, well, how dare those people stone him? He was our Savior, this and that and the other thing. Well, they do it today to people with enlightened minds.
Right. Look at what they did with the witches at Salem. They called them witches, and
right.
That's a mistake because they had a little bit of insight into things that the rest didn't understand. In Israel, some of the Israelis, when you ask them what do they think about Jesus, well, some will tell you he was an incredible teacher and he was a loving human being. And others will say, well, he's one of our boys that made good. That's how they look at it. So, but he was an incredible teacher. I've not met anyone over there who doesn't have respect for Jesus and the work that Jesus had done. Of course, they don't accept him as a savior, but they still feel very strongly about him. And eventually that will come around too, We'll all move into an energy field of cohesiveness, oneness. Can you imagine if people could understand that everything that is in the universe is contained within you?
Right.
You can do anything if you only understood it and knew how to use it.
Absolutely. If people would even just understand energy and know that, and that's what I think the people who built the pyramids, that's how they could manipulate the energy in order to thought become reality type thing, lift these heavy rocks that we can't even do today and the precision that we've done it today.
Yeah, well, look at that Japanese thing that they tried to do. They went there trying to build the thing in the way that is assumed that the Egyptians built it, and they couldn't do it. So, and that was a few years back.
Right.
They knew how to manipulate the energies. That's been lost, but it's now beginning to come back again, and hopefully this next 2 years will bring enlightenment. And in a way, it's a terrible thing what's happened to our country and to the other countries. I understand England is in the worst condition that we've been in with the recession and so forth. But it's brought us down to really beginning to work with what we have and to get off this need. You know, I want this, I want that, and begin to live a more simple life.
Simple. Yep. We need to go back to simplicity.
Exactly. Yeah. And look what we've done to this planet. I mean, we've destroyed the atmosphere, and we're continuing to do so. And, you know, I have all these kind of ideas. This terrible thing that happened in the Gulf with the fires and the devastation that it's doing. It did come at the appropriate time that we will no longer drill out there. Unless somehow they find a way that it would be totally protective. It's scary what can happen, and now they say it's going to hit Florida also, the oil slick, if it hasn't already. I haven't heard the news today, but
yeah, I haven't watched the television or listened to the radio for, I can't tell you how long, months and months and months, just because all the...
I don't want to hear that garbage.
Well, it's BS that they're putting out there. You can't even trust in the truth, and, you know...
You're absolutely right. I hardly ever turn it on, but someone was talking to me and said, you've got to turn on the TV and see what's happened with an oil slick that caught on fire. So we are a people destroying our planet, and I know deep inside of me that this is going to be stopping in the next couple of years. And we will emerge as the people we are supposed to be. And we will emerge understanding we have free will. So watch how you think. Watch what you do with that thought and get off the negativity. And at the same time, one of the things that Tom always says, the spokesperson for the Nine, to be positive with no sense is not good also. You have to have a balance.
Right.
And so it's all about balancing. I'm looking forward to a great world. I intend to live to be at least 100. And
good for you. You're not quite there, but you said you're 81.
I'm 81. So I'm thinking about this the other day, and I said, you know, it would be really nice to be 102. So that's what I'm striving for.
Well, thought becomes reality, so there you go.
102, and I want to see this incredible world that's going to emerge. And look at this incredible planet, how incredibly beautiful and wonderful it is. And we are messing it up. So, but young people are now beginning to understand how important it is to preserve the planet. One of the things I loved when I lived in Israel were the children that were taught in school from the beginning. You do not pull wild flowers. That is their place. And they provide the energy that is needed and the love and the beauty. And the parents would go out, and they had incredible wildflowers over there, and they would, you know, cut them, tear them up, and so forth. And the children were taught, you can't do that. So they would now say to the parents, no, Mommy, you can't do that. Not allowed to do that. Teacher says you can't do that. Can't pull out the wildflowers. Because of that, excuse me, the country of Israel has incredible wildflowers throughout the entire country. And it was the children that taught the parents.
Well, so I really believe conservation is important. Absolutely.
Excuse me a minute, okay?
Well, Phyllis, we have about 5 or 6 minutes left, and I want to thank you for being on the show, but would you like to leave our listeners with anything?
Yes, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me on, and I think that you are doing an absolutely incredible job awakening the public to the fact that your thoughts create your reality, and that by changing our thoughts and our way of being with ourselves and each other and our family brings about changes in your environment, and it's a trickle-down effect. It will affect your neighbors. It eventually will affect your town, your city. we talk about karma, and it's, in some sense, it's what goes around comes around idea. And what we have never truly realized, that there is karma of your neighborhood, there's karma of your town, there's karma of your city, then of your counties, and then into your country and worldwide. Because if we permit things to go on that we know deep down are not correct, but we turn our head away because we don't want the responsibility. Excuse me a minute.
Mm-hmm.
We are responsible. So if you're a
Right.
person who does not want to involve themselves, and that's okay because that's who you are, sit and pray. Get 2 or 3 people together with you. Meditate on that and changing that dynamics of your area, of your town. If there's a neighbor that's creating problems for you, which in turn creates problems for the city and the state or the street that you're on, get like-minded people. And if there's none there, get your friends from another area. Every Sunday at 9 p.m. Israeli time, so you have to check it out. We have people all over the world sitting with us and meditating. The 9 have asked us to do that. We meditate for all the countries. We take the countries all along the globe, and we hit each country asking that we strengthen the leadership, that we stop the devastation of the forest, that we stop the poverty, and eventually, enough of us do this, it will affect everyone on the planet. We ask at least once a month, if possible, to have 12 people. I take the first Sunday of the month, that you have 12 people meet together. If you can't do that, then have 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
The Trinity. And even if you have to meet with only yourself, sit with only yourself, you will link up. Your mind and your energy field will link up with others, start doing these meditations to change things in the world.
I really agree with what you're saying there. In fact, we got about 2 minutes, and I wanted to just add 1 or 2 last things. You were mentioning if there was somebody in the neighborhood that was causing chaos and all that. And if you can't get other like-minded people together, what I'd like to add to that is that if you could meditate and get into a 5th dimensional awareness and bring down unconditional love and take that within, it will diffuse the situation by itself. And 2, if you, the way the law of attraction works, and if we picture ourselves as cells on this planet, kind of like the cells in our body, and each one of us is a healthy cell, and thereby living the right ways and having positiveness, it is almost infectious. And because of the law of attraction, you attract more like-minded people, or by people being within your energy, you have the responsibility of having your frequency as high as possible. So that I really believe that people that come into contact with you raise their vibration, and it's just an infectious thing across the planet, and we have no choice but to heal in that manner.
And that's incredible, and that's so wonderful that you brought that out and talked about that. It solidifies what we've been talking about and how very important that we do this. We can slowly, by our own behavior, affect those around us, and that's basically what you're talking about.
Yep, unconditional love.
Unconditional love. And a lot of people have trouble with that, unconditional love. What does unconditional love mean is the answer that we get, or the question we get a lot. And, but it has to start with yourself also. As the Nine says, lots of times, don't do anything that you will not like yourself for.
Right.
And if you do that, then it moves into the direction of unconditional love. And you think about it, if you can't look at yourself in the mirror because you did something that you knew was not correct, it changes the whole dynamics of everything. So forgive yourself first for doing something that you knew was wrong, and make a point of not doing it again. If you have to be quiet about something, be quiet. But send out deep love for everything on this planet, for yourself and those around you, and that will attract to you all that is needed in order for this planet to change. Joe, thank you very much.
Phyllis, just hang on the line here while I wrap this up, okay?
Okay.
Let's see. Next week we'll be discussing the meaning and implications of crop circles with Joseph Marra. Thank you all for tuning into our show. If you like the show or dislike the show, any other questions or suggestions of content for future shows, email me at universaltalking@gmail.com. Or if you missed the show and would like to listen to the content or would like to refer a friend, simply log on to my website at www.universaltalk.info. And this is Joe Marra signing off for Universal Talk.